So being in a position of reporting out news, I regularly get tips, and sometimes these tips can lead to some brick walls that I run into to try to get statements on a variety of things. Other times you've got the various issues with agencies only revealing a little bit, but you do have the ongoing concerns of how gender ideology is making its way not in just Illinois schools, but also Illinois state agencies. And when you talk about the transgender ideology and how that's seeing some people with concerns of how it's being put in front of children and how the schools might be having certain books or literature or even lesson plans and a variety of other things that definitely has parents concerned with how their children are being exposed to this outside of their control. And one thing that you also have is some state agencies looking at, quote, dispelling myths about gender, quote, affirming care for youth. And I'd had this flyer that was shared with me. And reached out to the Illinois Department of Human Services, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, and also the State Board of Education. And this flyer, it was about dispelling myths around gender-affirming care for youth. And if you're following along online, you'll be able to see the flyer that was shared with me from somebody at the state agency. And it talks about a virtual presentation coming up, June 27th, and it's about dispelling myths around gender-affirming care. And I went to the registration link, and it actually showed that I could have registered for this event. And then when I got that confirmed, I then emailed the Department of Human Services, the Department of Child Care and Family Services, and also the State Board of Education. And I did get a reply back from all of those rather quickly. It was from DCFS, and they said that this is a DHS event. And then later on in the day, I then got more replies saying, Greg, please note that this is a closed event. And then I went back to the event registration page, and it disappeared. So the event registration page disappeared after my inquiry. So I reached out to State Senator Andrew Chesney, who is pretty vocal about these issues, and I got his reaction just to the initial information I was able to share with him about this event, a virtual presentation that looks to, quote, dispel myths around gender-affirming care for youth.
Well, from what little I know is they're trying to, normalize an abnormal behavior. And I think that a young group of kids that feel certain ways or have certain tendencies need to have professional guidance and counseling, and to have permanent gender changes at such a young age while their minds are still developing. These are still kids. I mean, gosh, if every parent implemented every child's desire, I mean, gosh, who knows what we do, right? I mean, we all have crazy ideas that we have when we're children, and I think that it's a very dangerous precedent for us to go down this path and start affirming a gender identity change for our youth. It's a very, very dangerous road. We need to keep government out of this. We need to empower parents. And the idea that the State Board of Education and additional government entities are going to play a role in this, in these gender transitions for kids. I mean, we're not talking adults, we're talking kids. Is very, very dangerous and frankly, inappropriate.
So again, this is a state agency that's hosting a virtual presentation about, quote, dispelling myths around gender-affirming care for youth. It's not just gender-affirming care, which is a term people use to support the idea of medical procedures or hormone therapy for individuals. But this isn't just for adults. This is for youth. And the bullet points on this flyer, it says, address the myths and misinformation around medical gender affirmation for youth and teens, explore the meaning and application of gender-affirming care for youth and teens beyond medical care, discuss the importance of adult supports in the development, mental health, and overall overall well-being of transgender and non-binary youth and teens, and explore existing supports for resources for youth in Illinois. So those are some of the bullet points that they look to highlight with their presentation, a closed-door presentation to state employees. But we've seen elsewhere across the country, even in Washington State, the governor there signing a law that protects nonprofits or guardians who shield youth coming in from out of Washington State to Washington State seeking certain types of procedures like hormone therapy or even surgeries in Washington State. It allows for nonprofits and guardians to shield those children from outside actors wanting to come in and maybe be a blockade of that type of medical procedure being conducted. But you also had in California a measure that was debated, and we talked about this last week, that ultimately says that if a parent does not affirm a child's choice of gender, then they could possibly have their parental custody revoked, which is a measure that made its way through the Illinois Senate, I believe, but in the California Senate, I should say. But in Illinois, are we seeing a trend towards that? Again, Andrew Chesney reacting.
Well, there's a lot of problems when you take parents out of the day-to-day operations of parenting their children, and government should not be parenting a young child, and nor should they be offering really any guidance. A parent is tasked with a very big task of offering the appropriate counsel and guidance and discipline for their children. And the idea that a 13-year-old young kid can have essentially a male castration is a very dangerous, irreversible procedure and very damaging to the long-term health of a child. And I would have the same position if it was a female, in the various different ways that they can, you can't change your identity, you can't change your gender. It's not possible. So the idea that you can, even through procedures, change your gender is simply not following science. So you can feel however you want, and that doesn't mean that we can't accept how somebody feels, and that doesn't mean that we can't appreciate their position, but that doesn't mean it actually changes their, or should not change their legal gender that they were assigned at birth. And that's the very dangerous precedent that I think that liberal administrations and liberal general assemblies are going down, that they believe that certain individuals, and while their minds are still being developed, can have life-altering surgeries. And, I don't think most people believe there are more than two genders. We are seeing that perhaps there are government entities that are trying to redefine science, but that doesn't mean that they're right. That just means they're changing definitions. And so this is again this is separate from the issue that you mentioned about abortion. These are medical changes that have to do regarding gender, and the idea that somebody can say they're non-binary, or they feel like a female when they're a male, or male when they're a female. These types of reactions require counseling and require love and need the family to figure out what's going on in this young child's mind that makes them feel this way. The idea that the government is going to step in and normalize that and then provide a conduit for life-altering procedures is not only dangerous, but I would argue is child abuse.
So again, that's Andrew Chesney, conversation I had with him last week about this story I was putting together of Illinois agency hosting closed event titled Dispelling Myths Around Gender-Affirming Care for Youth. And as I dug deeper into this, I found that the Department of Healthcare and Family Services, they say the department financially covers gender-affirming procedures even for youth under 21 on a case-by-case basis, basis if it's determined to be medically necessary. And they also go further. If you follow the links here, you can see the documentation yourself. Illinois Administrative Code for the medical payments says, notwithstanding the age limit in subsection A16A, payment for gender-affirming surgery, services, and procedures for patients under 21 years of age will be made in specific cases if medical necessity is demonstrated and prior approval is received. So you've got that in the mix as well. Taxpayer cost. Andrew Chesney reacting to some of that.
Well, again, you have government stepping in on an issue that needs to be handled between the parents and their child, and so I would push back on the idea that government of any kind needs to come in to try to normalize a teen's feelings or a young child's feelings. These are kids. Now, if an adult wants to engage in a procedure that they pay for and that we never have to pay for, they can do what they want, but that doesn't mean it changes their ability to participate in the sport that they were assigned at birth in terms of their gender. That doesn't mean they get to go into a woman's restroom. So, their rights are not transferred simply because they feel a certain way, because you just can't change your identity or your gender based on how you feel. That just doesn't work. It's not following at all science. And so the idea that the government's going to step in and play a role to allow a child to mutilate their body is pretty bizarre. And then not only are they going to play a role, but the taxpayers are going to fund it, is just extreme and very extreme in the boldest of terms. I don't know that you can get more extreme than a taxpayer-funded young child male castration. I don't know that you can go farther than that. I guess maybe you can. I don't think you can. I mean, it's pretty hard to go farther than that. And so, these are topics that are certainly sensitive, and that doesn't mean that we don't empathize with children that have some gender confusion.
But Andrew Chesney says that these are things that are irreversible and that could lead to long-lasting health concerns and also long-lasting psychological concerns that ultimately taxpayers may have to foot the bill for anyway. So a lot more to come on that.